I made the connection to the people that I had known who had gone on these drugs. It's not that it cured depression, it made them not care about whether they were depressed. They didn't care of they all of a sudden were driving off the road or something like that. And so it occurred to me that maybe that was what was going on with these school shootings. We put together who was on the drugs, and it turned out an unbelievable amount of these school shooters had been taking antidepressants or something similar. My bosses were courageous in allowing me to go forward with, a lot of pieces on this issue, and, hopefully it's made a difference. Two years ago, 16-year-old Corey Badsgard took a rifle to his high school and held 23 classmates hostage. Just one more apparently unexplainable violent outburst at school. Unexplainable to everyone but Corey's dad.
And no doubt that the medication did this. I mean, he had amnesia, hallucinations earlier, which are all side effects of the medication.
We found a disturbing number of recent school shooters were either on medication or were experiencing withdrawal. The list includes 15-year-old Kip Kinkle withdrawing from Prozac when he shot 22 classmates after murdering his mother and stepfather. 14-year-old Elizabeth Bush on Prozac when she blasted away at fellow students in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. 18-year-old Jason Hoffman on Effexor and Celexa when he opened fire at his California high school. 15-year-old Sean Cooper on a mix of antidepressants when he shot students in Idaho. 15-year-old TJ Solomon also on a mix of antidepressants when he aimed his shotgun at classmates in Conyers, Georgia. And 17-year-old Eric Harris on Luvox when he and partner Dylan Klebold killed 12 classmates and a teacher in the bloodiest school massacre yet, Columbine.
Take the figures of one drug manufacturer talked about maniacal behavior of 4%. Well, if there are, as some reports say, 2 million kids on these drugs, that's 80,000 time bombs waiting to explode.
Waiting to explode. That's exactly what Corey Badsgard's father said happened to Corey on antidepressants. He says the solution is simple. Stop drugging our children.
In 2002, Big Story correspondent Douglas Kennedy was the first national reporter to expose the link between antidepressants and violence, a report that sparked congressional hearings.
4 years ago, we showed that 7 out of the 12 previous school shooters were either on antidepressants or were withdrawing from antidepressants. Since then, the trend has continued with 16-year-old Jeff Weiss, who in 2005 snapped while on Prozac, killing 9 people and wounding 5 at his high school in Red Lake, Minnesota. The real problem with antidepressants is how many people are taking them. Right now, that's about 30 million Americans. Studies show about 5% of them will develop mania.
Douglas Kennedy joins us here on set, just back from Virginia.
The problem here is everybody wants this guy to get more mental health. The mental health that people are providing is not working. It's unbelievable to me that we say, oh, this guy needs to be more involved in the system. It is the system that failed this guy. This guy was involved in the system. If you give somebody who is volatile these kinds of drugs, it numbs them out. It disconnects them from themselves. That's what they're designed to do. It takes their emotions away. So it turns them into psychopaths. Now we know from police that 27-year-old Stephen Kazmierczak also had recently been taking medication. How many times are we going to have one of these school shootings when we come to learn that he was on some sort of medication? I mean, this is something we really have to look at. We have to look deeper into. This is basic stuff that we should be looking into in every school shooter. The response from the drug companies was most interesting because they would deny the fact that the drugs cause suicide, and they would deny that the drugs cause violence, but they wouldn't put anybody on television to say that. They said, please go and talk to this paid doctor who will tell you this. But they wouldn't put anybody on themselves. And that was a red flag. They know that the drugs cause suicide, and they know that drugs cause violence, and they don't want to say that they don't.
Fox's Douglas Kennedy was the first national reporter to link antidepressant medications to adolescent suicide and violence. This prompted hearings that eventually resulted in the black box warnings from the FDA. He reports on a brand new update for us. Here's Douglas.
Did this major drug company, GlaxoSmithKline, hide the deadly effects of one of the country's most popular antidepressants? That's the blockbuster allegation government officials are now investigating. The increased risk of suicide for people taking Paxil was first reported by Fox News Channel in November 2002. At that time, GSK vehemently denied Paxil caused suicide in a statement to Fox News. There is no link between use of Paxil and an increased risk in suicide or suicide attempts. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, both the Justice Department and this government committee, headed by Iowa Senator Charles Grassley, are looking into what could possibly turn out to be a criminal investigation. Essentially, it looks like GlaxoSmithKline bamboozled the FDA, Grassley said in a statement. But GSK is no longer denying that Paxil causes suicide, at least in adolescents and young adults. In fact, in 2004, after Fox's series on antidepressant suicides, the FDA voted to force GSK to put a black box warning on Paxil about the risk of adolescent suicide. I remember walking the spokesperson for GlaxoSmithKline through the numbers and saying, your drug is causing suicide. This drug that is supposed to cure depression and is supposed to cure suicide is causing suicide. We had a very lively argument. What was stunning to me was how vociferous they were about denying that the drugs caused suicide. And 2 years later, they were forced to admit, yes, the drugs do cause suicide. And the FDA forcing them to put black box warnings on all of those medications.
A new warning from a federal panel is adding to the argument over medication of America's children. It's an issue Fox's Douglas Kennedy has been following quite closely. He was the first national reporter to link antidepressant medications to adolescent suicide and violence. That prompted a lot of government action. Douglas?
Yeah, John, for years the FDA ignored the dangerous side effects of antidepressants. Now it seems to be doing the same thing with antipsychotics, a group of drugs some say is seriously harming our nation's youth. The risks are great, but that doesn't stop drug companies from trying to get children to take them. Now, one drug company is being held accountable for a practice prosecutors say it made into a science. The government alleges Lilly promoted Zyprexa for rowdy children in schools and unruly adults in nursing homes as a sort of chemical restraint. And even though the drug causes obesity in children and can kill elderly patients, its use in both groups soared over the past 5 years, even though there's no proven benefit to either population. Now, drug maker Eli Lilly will pay $1.4 billion, the biggest fine in the history of the Justice Department. Since 1996, Zyprexa has been one of the biggest selling drugs in the world, bringing in over $36 billion, which to some may make that $1.4 billion fine seem like a traffic ticket. Unfortunately, the drug companies have more money than is possibly imaginable. They have more money than big oil, big steel, or big railroad had combined in their heydays. So that money corrupts. When these drugs first came out, they said, we are going to solve a chemical deficiency. We're going to cure suicide. We're going to cure depression. The drugs do not cure suicide. They do not cure depression. And there is no chemical deficiency. If there was a chemical deficiency, we would be able to test it chemically. They cannot test it chemically. That is a lie. That has been a lie. And it continues, unfortunately, to be a lie. You have to have informed consent. If you're having people ingest something, you have to tell them what it's going to do to them. Particularly, you have to tell them that when you start this, it's very unlikely that you will ever get off of it. It changes your brain chemistry to the point where you will rely on this for the rest of your life. It is a life sentence when you start these drugs. And I don't think that it has quite gotten into the consciousness of our society about what has actually happened over the last 20 years. I mean, I think if it really got into the consciousness, people would be in jail.